Welcome back to Outdoor Exploration. Today you get to watch my son Tally climb a tree. I have been, during the pandemic, also consulting for free for parents working towards unschooling or self-directed learning for their kids who are mostly at home. And I thought, since really the point of this video series is the same as my work in alternative education, I thought I could explain how they come together today, and you get the benefit of seeing the view from up a tall tree. The reason I do this series is to encourage people to explore, and also the reason I work with both adults and children and parents is to encourage people to explore and to learn by exploration. So you may know that I raised my kids through explorative learning, which is also called unschooling, basically by allowing them to just teach themselves. And the way that works is, well, think of it this way. When babies are born, nobody's there with a classroom to teach them how to nurse or roll over, or all the skills that they develop over time, but they learn them. And you know, after a couple of days, most babies have a good latch. After a few weeks, they may start holding their heads up. Eventually, they'll learn to roll over, eventually to crawl. And they don't learn those things by somebody, you know, holding their arms or something and helping them push over. Well, not usually. Usually, they learn to roll over by pushing up with their hands and noticing that they're falling and experimenting with how their body works and how they can move around. And eventually they're running. Basically, humans, like all other animals and plants and everything, are growing and evolving by experimentation and by failure, learning from our mistakes, all of those things. Even if you're in school doing math and you have a problem with something, you quite often learn from having made a mistake, whether it was because it was an entertaining mistake, an upsetting mistake, an enlightening mistake, whatever it was. It helps you remember that experience. So the reason I came to my garden to start this video was because I'm trying to grow my vegetable garden in a sort of managed way that's similar to how plants grow in the wilderness. Similar, I said, not the same. But this is my lettuce bed, which has a few lettuces in it. It has some chickweed, and it also has some dandelions. And it has a bunch of little sorrel, some mustard here, which has mostly gone to seed. And all of these things are just sort of living together. And here and there I'll add a little bit of manure, but I haven't dug up this bed in years, other than the natural sort of digging up that happens if you pull up a plant. And that's because it's an ecosystem of, you know, everything of plants and animals, insects, microbes, even the weather, and the fact that up here in my yard, this is one of the highest points of the area around my house, there's not a whole lot of water in the summer. So this is a drier, more windy and sunnier spot than most other places. Therefore, it happens to be good for lettuce. It also gets afternoon shade, so in the summer my lettuce likes that. You see, in this bed I have some things, and in this one totally other things. There are even blackberries making their way in from behind it there, which I will eventually pull out because they'll take over everything and I won't have lettuce. So it's managed, but every plant in here is experimenting. It's growing, you know, up, and then maybe this leaf will be in the way of this lettuce here, and so, you know, maybe the borage gets so tall that the lettuce shrinks away, or maybe the lettuce leans away, and they grow together in a community, not only with the other plants, but as I said, all the microorganisms and mushrooms and everything else, to develop as whole individuals within the community. And people are the same. You know, this isn't anti-school or anything. Schools are part of our community, but it's just to look at how we learn, whether we're at home or in school or on vacation or we're, you know, sitting in our bed at night. Are we learning through being taught or through exploring ourselves? And the best teachers I know allow their students to learn from exploration. So basically that's what I did with my kids. I just allowed them to explore and to learn by discovery. So it just basically didn't stop with crawling and those things, but continued on with learning to read. And in fact, I tried to teach my son to read, but he hates being taught by somebody, and so he quit reading until I stopped trying to teach him, and then a few months later he taught himself. In fact, if you talk to many unschoolers, you'll find that all over the place. Kids end up teaching themselves to read. Sometimes at 10, sometimes at 3. 4 is more often, 5, 6. But whenever it happens, they're doing it because they had an intrinsic curiosity to understand what people are doing with these letters. And in fact, the same thing happens with math. And my daughter did teach herself math. That it's actually natural. So when we're going out exploring the wilderness, sure, you can be learning by looking up what plants you're finding, and here's a type of clover in my lawn. You can look that up in a book and find it out. That is a type of learning, especially because you're doing that out of curiosity to see what the clover is. But maybe you're learning so many more things. Maybe you're learning about the shape of the clover and what does this little set of 3 leaves remind you of else in the world. Maybe it reminds you of a 3-legged stool. I don't know. Maybe you're making things with the clover leaves. Maybe your exploration looking at the clover leads you to think about diversity, or to think about density in terms of how much clover is growing where. And even if you don't have the words to put with those as a child, you're learning the concepts, so that when you're older and talking to people, maybe adults who have those words, they make sense to you. And basically, in the theory of explorative learning, that's how learning happens, through curiosity. So the idea of climbing a tree is really, I came up with that idea because Tally likes to climb trees. And the best thing we can do as parents, Tally's 18 now, obviously you're looking at a man climbing a tree, whether he wants to admit it or not, but he's been doing that since he was a kid. And it's the best way that we can encourage our kids and each other to learn through exploration is by just allowing them. And I often tell this story of the day I really realized how important that is, when Tally was, I guess, about 5, and we were heading back from the preschool where we used to drop his sister off, and we stopped at the creek where he was dropping rocks in, and he would just grab a handful of pebbles from the path and stand there dropping them in one at a time, very slowly, just watching them, and then the next one. And this went on for about 20 minutes, and eventually his sister was crying, and I begged him to go home eventually. First I asked nicely, and then I tried to encourage him by other means, and he just wouldn't go. He just said, no, I'm watching the rocks. And I started to think, oh, maybe something's wrong with you. You have no interest in the world. You're standing there dropping pebbles in the creek forever, and I can't make you interested in anything else. And eventually I did coerce him away from the creek with his crying sister also in tow, and we made it home. And sometime later that day he said to me, yeah, I was watching all the ripples of the water, how it makes waves, and if you drop different shapes of rocks it makes different waves, and some of them fall differently, and some of them go straight down, and not all of them go straight down. And I thought, holy, my son's doing science, and I tried to stop him. And that's why I'm doing this video today. Whatever we do, anytime, anywhere, we're learning from. So yes, we can learn from other people telling us what to learn, but sometimes it's more exciting to learn through our own intuitive process, through our own engagement, our own curiosity, just to get out and see what we see. So Tally with his camera is showing us the world as he sees it, as he has seen it for 18 plus years now, and what's remarkable to me is to see that as my kids have grown up, their perspective has value. And that tells me also my perspective has value. We all see things from our own unique set of experiences and understanding, and then we take something different from everything. So if I climb this tree, it's not going to be the same. I'll see different things than Talie would. You would see different things than Talie would. When you're seeing through his lens right now, you're seeing something different than he's seeing. But both have value. And that diversity of how we all experience the world is what makes us evolve. Our technology, our health, our bodies even. That's what makes everybody evolve. Like the plants in my garden. You know, the more of us are there trying and doing different things, the more we experiment, the more we learn, and the more we become as a society, as a whole ecosystem. So, yeah, that's what I think about that. And I'm just going to leave you for a few minutes here to see and hear what Talie sees from the top of the tree. So I was thinking while he was up there, and he asked me, why wasn't I scared? And I thought, oh, maybe we should talk about, well, safety, but mostly fear. Because I think that as parents, that's usually the trouble. It's usually the thing preventing us from allowing our kids to just explore. And I'm not different from everybody else. I've spent most of my kids' lives being terrified that something bad would happen. And sometimes bad things happen also. But the thing is, I know that we have to take risks in order to learn to take risks safely. So if I never let my kids climb trees, how would they ever know how to climb a tree safely? And yes, it matters, because you don't learn to maneuver your body unless you can try things out. So it isn't that, oh, if you just never climb a tree in your life, you can't benefit from having climbed a tree. Yes, you can. You learn so many things about the way your body works, but also, I mean, if you saw him breaking the branches off of the dead branches off of the tree up there, you learn about which parts of what kinds of trees keep you safe. Cedars, like this one, are generally quite safe for climbing because they're flexible, and if the branches are alive, they're generally going to hold you unless they're tiny. So, I mean, you can have rules like, well, if the branch is thicker than your arm, it will hold you. I learned that as a child, and sometimes that's true, but if it's a rotten branch that's thicker than your arm, no, it won't. If it's a different kind of tree, it may be so flexible that it just bends and you fall off, or so brittle that it breaks. And through climbing trees, we learn about the different types of trees and the different kinds of textures of branches and how to test them, how to be safe, both in the way we maneuver and in the way we choose where we're going to step. or I should say the way we look at the tree. So exploration teaches us observation, and one of the best ways we can get over our fear as parents is by doing it ourselves. So I have the benefit of having climbed this tree both as a child and recently, so it's not as scary for me because I know kind of how it is. I know it's a pretty safe tree to climb, but I haven't climbed every tree he's climbed, obviously, and as it should be. But I choose to do things myself that challenge me because it helps my kids learn to do things that challenge them. And in doing those things, we all learn to know our surroundings, our ecosystem, our bodies, our limits, ourselves, and in that way we're safer. So yes, I was scared. He was up there, of course, however many 50 feet or more up that tree. But I choose to allow it to happen and to work on my own fear, because it's not helping anybody, it's just in the way. Obviously there's some fear that keeps us safe, but for him, he needed his own fear up there. He has his own fear. He knows where his limits are. He said at some point, it's too scary to go any further. This is as far as I can safely go. That's what we need, all of us, to learn. Not just our kids, but all of us. We need to know where our limits are. So we have to take risks and know how to get out of dangerous situations, and not just climbing trees, but in everything. Yeah, so that's today. Also, I should say that this week is the first week we're only going to be doing 2 videos a week. So Mondays and Fridays. This Friday is back to chicks again, and I may start expanding a little bit into chicks and veggie garden. And that'll always include some edible weeds because, you know, they're everywhere. And then next Monday we'll do another something, probably with wild plants, because we often do. And yeah, so that's it for this week. Happy exploring. I hope you have a fabulous week.